Today I'm going to start by reading you a poem that you probably won't understand. And this first time, I'm not even going to help you with my intonation. You'll probably have the feeling I often do when I first read a poem, one essentially of incomprehension and boredom. But bear with me, because I will also tell you in advance that now that I do understand it, I absolutely adore this delightfully playful piece of romantic poetry. After I read it through once, I will see if I can transform your experience in a matter of minutes. It's the poem Break of Day by John Donne. So here we go. "'Tis true, 'tis day, what though it be? O wilt thou therefore rise from me? Why should we rise because 'tis light? Did we lie down because 'twas night? Love, which in spite of darkness brought us hither, should in despite of light keep us together. Light hath no tongue, but is all eye. If it could speak, as well as spy, this were the worst that it could say, that being well I fain would stay, and that I loved my heart and honor so, that I would not from him that had them go. Must business thee from hence remove? Oh, that's the worst disease of love. The poor, the foul, the false love can admit, but not the busied man. He which hath business and makes love doth do such wrong as when a married man doth woo." I'm sorry, I know that was terrible, but there's a point. I've often tried to make the point to people that the fact that the value of classic poetry is not always automatically or easily accessible does not mean it isn't there. In fact, it's precisely because there is so much there that it might take a bit of work. Many things that confer on us a life-enhancing benefit require that we put in a little effort. Just as physical health requires that we stretch and strengthen our bodies, spiritual health requires that we stretch and strengthen our souls. Sound and Sense has a number of helpful ways to put this point. First, they say reading a poem is like receiving a message by radio. It requires both a transmission station and a receiving set, and the completeness of the communication depends both on the power and the clarity of the transmitter and the sensitivity and the tuning of the receiver. Their purpose in writing the book, and mine in sharing it, is to help you increase your range as a receiver. The authors also say, and I'm going to quote them here, quote, "You can read poetry lying in a hammock, but only if you refuse to put your mind in the same attitude as your body. Its purpose is not to soothe and relax, but to arouse and awake, to shock us into life, to make us more alive," unquote. So let's climb out of our mental hammocks and try to tune our receivers to John Donne, taking this poem one stanza at a time. In the first stanza, we are plunged into the middle of an intimate bedroom conversation, with a woman asking her lover whether he must rise and go just because the sun has risen. It wasn't the darkness, she says, but love that brought them together. So why should the light force them to part? I picture it as the coy argument of a playful lover trying to persuade her man to put aside his responsibilities and stay in bed with her. Then, in the second, she puts on more pressure, laying the guilt on more thickly. The sun is likened to some noisome intruder invading their private space, and she says that if it could speak and not just silently spy on them, the worst it could say is, well, here's the line I personally struggled with the most. The worst it could say is, "That being well I fain would stay, and that I loved my heart and honor so that I would not from him that had them go." That line is a syntactic tangle, but if you pause on it and read it carefully, integrating it with the rest, you can unlock its meaning, which is essentially, I would happily stay here. I've given my honor and my heart to you, so I could not part from you and leave them behind. The implication, of course, being that if he shares her feelings, he would feel the same way. In the third stanza, the case becomes stronger still. She calls work, business, the worst disease of love because of how it cruelly separates even the most virtuous of couples. The poor, the foul, the false, they're allowed their love, but the busy man, with his neglect, does a worse wrong than a faithless husband. Okay, so now with that explanation as context, let me read this poem again, with some intonation this time. Break of Day by John Donne. 'Tis true, 'tis day, what though it be? Oh, wilt thou therefore rise from me? Why should we rise because 'tis light? Did we lie down because 'twas night? Love, which in spite of darkness brought us hither, should, in despite of light, keep us together. Light hath no tongue, but is all eye. If it could speak as well as spy, this were the worst that it could say, that being well I fain would stay, and that I loved my heart and honor so, that I would not from him that had them go. Must business thee from hence remove? Oh, that's the worst disease of love. The poor, the foul, the false love can admit, but not the busied man. He which hath business and makes love doth do such wrong as when a married man doth woo. I hope you enjoyed this poem more the second time around, and that it is an image you can call to mind when you feel that tug of pain at being separated from a lover. I also hope it can serve as a model of the sort of transformational experience you can have reading a poem. But, you might object, you helped us. How do we experience that sort of transformation on our own? That will be the subject of the next video.